he loved this country. It gave him everything. And every day we woke up, he would just say how lucky you are you're not growing up in a communist regime where you're forced to do things or compelled and coerced. And he said, I want you to be very grateful. And it was almost like this daily ritual of you can do anything in this country if you put your mind to it.
But the migrants that we're getting these days don't love Australia that much, do they?
Well, I'm not saying that, no.
This nation has for generations been a place of refuge away from conflict. And to see people migrating here and bringing conflict with them, it's an utter betrayal.
It doesn't matter where you are. I don't care what ethnicity you are. To me, you're Australian.
Yep.
Pick up the Australian values, pick up the Australian tradition, run with it, respect it. We need a dominant culture here that is Australian. We need Australia first. The great migrant story is you're going to face so many challenges. You may not win every battle, but you just got to get up every day, show up, get to work, and just do your bit.
I don't think you're fringe. I think you represent mainstream Australia. Tony Nikolic, welcome to the studio.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, listen, you're a human rights lawyer who has helped out a lot of our Indigenous brothers and sisters and people who were victimised during COVID. And now you're running for the second time for the seat of Werriwa in Western Sydney for a party called the People First Party. Now, mate, both of those labels would normally, under normal circumstances, label you as somewhat of a lefty, but you're not, are you, mate?
Oh, absolutely not. I actually grew up almost, I was in the Labor lawyers there for some time, and I grew up supporting that sort of vision. However, it's departed from its traditional values. I used to campaign and lobby with the Labor politicians. Yeah, I used to go to outings and barefoot bowls with Tony Burke, and I was good mates with the late Bruce Childs, Senator Bruce Childs, and he was such a lovely man. But I think that there is the pinnacle, Bruce Childs, because he was a senator, on my understanding, under the Hawke administration. But that's where I think Labor sort of lost its way. And
in the late 80s?
Well, he would have left in the 90s, but then his legacy lived on, and Tanya Plibersek was his understudy. They're all lovely people personally. It's great, but I just think the value system that was the working class, Labor, heartland, striving to help the middle and the lower classes to push, it's no longer there. So for me, that juxtaposition that you just mentioned there with respect to the Indigenous and the People's First, I still got that love of help for the community, and I do that. And so I do a lot of work, death in custodies, incarcerated. I'm known to have flown over to, say, Kalgoorlie.
What sort of cases do you do?
Well, some of them are death in custody type cases where, the First Nations person may have been by way of positional asphyxiation when they were arrested, and they pass away whilst being arrested. So I'll do those sorts of coronial type cases.
That's sort of legal jargon for he was strangled by a cop, isn't it?
Well, where they put them face down on the ground and they pile on top, and you actually hear him saying, I can't breathe. And that's on the body-worn footage, for instance. I can't breathe. And the police, in some instances, we've seen their standard operating procedures, that they have changed over time, and they're very aware of that now, but it still happens.
So you rush in to defend they're dead, but you rush in to prosecute the officer who may have been guilty of manslaughter.
Well, we want to instigate a coronial inquest to find out, firstly, where's the justice for the family? Will there be justice for this? Now, yes, they are a First Nations family. They are living, most of them, and still, despite the closing the gap, which I don't believe has been closed at all, because when you actually go to the communities, which I do a lot of, I haven't done it in the last year or so, but we do this, and we're not seeing that gap practically close. And that to me is a big problem still.
It's amazing to hear you, a conservative, talk like this, because all these topics and all these attitudes towards our fellow citizens, our least advantaged fellow citizens, are generally monopolised by the left. But conservative values are more in tune, I would argue, these days with caring for the least advantaged than the left wing are. What drives you to look after these people?
I think it comes back to my parents. My parents immigrated from the Balkans. My father in the mid-50s. Mother came, I think, in the early 60s when they got married. So they came from Italy. So from the Balkans to Italy, Italy to Fremantle. From Fremantle up to Darwin. I was born in Darwin. And after Cyclone Tracy, moved down to Sydney because the cyclone, my parents felt that the cyclone was a very dangerous place to be bringing up kids. And Darwin is that frontier. So they moved down to Sydney sometime in the mid-70s and been here ever since. But for me, it's that my mother, before she passed away, and it's an indelible thing for me, is that she said, when I graduated with law, and she said, as a lawyer, you've been given some skills, basically. Those skills allow you to do a few things. One is you can earn money, but she said you can also help people in need. Remember, money's not everything. So where you see someone who's in jail, sometimes they don't have family. Sometimes they didn't have that family structure behind them to help them, and it wasn't their fault. You're going to have people who need you because they're sick. Sometimes you've got people who are emotionally in need of further care, and again, they're not really in tune with themselves emotionally. And she said, when we leave here, she said, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And so you came with nothing. You're going to leave. You may leave assets. You may leave a wallet, but you can't take it with you. But what you can take with you is the fact that you helped humanity and you walk away with a full heart and soul. And she said, you need to compare that to someone who wants Ferraris, houses, a waterfront view. And to me, I've taken that balance to where, yes, I am a commercial guy. I do run a business and I do employ people and I want them to prosper. But I also do a lot of community work on the ground. And as I said, I went over to Kalgoorlie when the Elijah Doherty case occurred, and there were some people during the riots, and it was the First Nations people. They were predominantly incarcerated for a right, and my client, Mr. Yarran, and it was a Supreme Court appeal over there that we succeeded in. We got him out. He was incarcerated, but he wasn't there for that part of the riot, and no one could see that. And so we flew over from here to there to show people that just because this happened, he wasn't there.
So
and it was
if
unfair.
you hadn't flown over there,
he would have spent
Mr.
that
Yarran
time.
would still be in jail. So it's interesting that you bring up your mother in that circumstance. I'm the son of a migrant myself, post-war migrant, who came from Singapore, and I've said it often, and I'll say it till the day I die. He was the most patriotic Australian I've ever met.
Yes.
That generation of post-war migrants, I think, built Australia more than, we appreciate these days.
Yes.
But migration is now a serious issue in Australia.
Yes.
And last night, as we discussed prior to this, to turning the cameras on, last night our immigration minister, Tony Burke, visited a mosque in Western Sydney, and the Australian Federal Police accompanied him, and information arose that some men were about to arrive at the mosque who were intent on seriously threatening Tony Burke. And Tony Burke, the immigration minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, had to do a runner. Now, the accusation against Burke by these thugs, and they're nothing less than thugs, nothing more than thugs, was that he is racist for not more energetically supporting Palestine in the fight in the war against Israel. Now, I think, Tony, that we are at a position now where if we continue down this road of immigration from cultures that don't assimilate with ours, Australia is pretty much done for. What do you think?
There's a few elements there, and you're right. I think if I could just sort of take it back one step slightly with the migrant coming over, and I'll just pick it up from there, which was like yourself. My father came from another country. He worked in the sugarcane fields, went down to the snowy rivers, and not just him, but many, many cultures, many different people, ethnicities. They all came to this country.
Did your dad help build the snowy?
Well, he was on that program there for a while,
Wow.
and so he worked on the sugarcane fields, like a lot of migrants at the time, and they did a lot of that seasonal work because there was nothing else to do, and they were building roads and all that sort of stuff. And he ended up at Qantas for many, many years. That's where he ended up. But the position with that is that he loved this country. It gave him everything. And every day we woke up, he would just say how lucky you are you're not growing up in a communist regime where you're forced to do things or compelled and coerced. And he said, I want you to be very grateful. And it was almost like this daily ritual of you can do anything in this country if you put your mind to it. And so he still had his ethnic ties with the Balkans, so Albanian, growing up in Montenegro, serving the Croatian army. There it is. You do it now, and it's like Tony the Yugoslav from Wogboy. He goes, I wake up in the morning, I want to kill myself. But that's not what it is. That was a unified country at the time, and that's the part it was. So when he came here, this is what he did. And he worked for this country, and he loved, until his passing, he loved, and so did my mum. You know, you walk in there, we had, flags, but it was always the Australian culture, and he was bringing people in.
But the migrants that we're getting these days don't love Australia that much, do they?
Well, I'm not seeing that, no. And I think that's, and I think the point with that is that we're mixing multi-ethnicity with multiculturalism. Multiculturalism, well, my culture is Australia, okay? So I grow up, I want my kids to grow up to be Australian. Yes, they have an ethnic lineage and there's a primordial affiliation by virtue of ethnicity to another place. You want to cook, within that cultural realm. So traditions repeated become culture. Okay?
Yep.
That's the sociological type of issue we're talking about here. If we're going to build a tradition of Australian, then we're losing that value. Okay? And why? Because we need a dominant culture here that is Australian. We need Australia first. And this is where I believe we've departed. Lovely country, lovely people. We cannot divert ourselves and start taking in these various cultures only to the extent, and I say that only to the extent that it's watering down who we are. Okay, we have an identity. We need to preserve that identity. They're bringing their identity here and trying to impose. I've got nothing against it, believe me. I've got nothing against. I'm a migrant. How can I? How do you call an immigration minister racist? They're letting people in. It's ridiculous.
The irony is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So the warnings that your dad gave you about tyranny, what experiences of tyranny did he have?
Well, it's a very stark one, because he said, as he was growing up, born in 1935, by the end of World War II, he was 10 years old. He remembers walking down the road, and he would tell me these stories, and German planes strafing, people walking down the roads, and they'd all have to jump into the bushes. He would say that American pilots or Allied pilots, whoever they were, he was very young, but he'd remember parachutes falling, and in the villages around there would rush out, grab that pilot and get the parachute, and the women, this is how it worked. It was very interesting, because the women would grab that parachute, cut the cords, and turn the parachute into like blankets or something like that. Use the cords for the cattle and things like that. By the time the Germans got to where they believed this parachute, there was no parachute left. There was no evidence.
They did that to hide the US soldiers.
That's right. And as you know, there was a lot of persecution of the Jewish population in that area, and my father used to tell me they'd take him into the Albanian railway, the underground railroad, and it went all the way through the Balkans, by the way. And really, really nice story actually. My son was playing for football in New South Wales, and there was
in rugby league.
Soccer.
Yeah,
And he was represented in with the eastern suburbs actually, even though we lived in the St George area. And there was an elderly gentleman of Jewish faith, and my father, and their granddads. They're watching these kids running around the soccer field, and they just got talking. And an amazing thing, he said, "Just hold on." He said to my dad, because my dad told me the story later, and he came back and we were paying our fees that day. It was like $2,500 back then, and that was in the early 2000s or something like that, mid 2000s, and my dad went to pay my son's fees, and he said, "No, you've already been paid." And he goes, "What do you mean? That gentleman paid them for you." And my father went to that guy and he said, "Did you pay my grandson's fees?" And he says, "Yes." And he goes, "Why?" And he said, "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Albanians and the people in the Balkans taking my family in the Underground Railroad and getting them out." And that's a story, and I still get goosebumps from...
I'm getting goosebumps.
Because they're real-life stories of two old gentlemen.
You know what else? It's an Australian story as well. This nation has for, generations been a place of refuge away from conflict. And to see people migrating here and bringing conflict with them, it's an utter betrayal. I can't overstate it enough. I mean, the fact that Tony Burke and the Labor Party and the Liberal Party to a lesser extent have been courting this particular demographic as a block of votes for, 30 years now? I think that's a betrayal of Australia. Sorry to divert you from that wonderful story about your dad, but I think what we're witnessing now is the evolution of Australia into a country where that kind of anecdote is no longer possible.
No, it's not. But by the same token, even the Muslim people, they are lovely people. They are right on board. But again, it doesn't matter where you are. I don't care what ethnicity you are. To me, you're Australian. Yep. Pick up the Australian values. Pick up the Australian tradition. Run with it. Respect it. Yep. Okay. You want the traditions of your ethnicity and where you came from. I want them too, but I'm an Australian. I need to give what I have to this country and let it build it from the ground up. And that's when you look at those migrant stories we were talking about, cutting sugarcane and building roads and the Snowy River. These are all programs that built this country, and we need these people. And I say holistically, because we should be one, and that's how we need to view ourselves. We need to view ourselves as one. And I'm saying that when we start saying this multiculturalism, it creates silos, and those silos can only damage us because it creates division. Okay? And I say that, well, I'm not ethnicity A, I'm ethnicity B, and we don't like... Well, that's not how it is. And we're seeing that diverse approach happening in the Middle East. But the majority of our existence, we're peaceful. Yeah. And it's usually by virtue of a division, and it's by virtue of inculcating these divisions politically. Therefore, it becomes politically manipulative to get these people to counteract each other. And I can't see the worth in that. But if we embraced an Australian, we are one.
Do you think the two major parties feel the same way?
No.
Wow, that was a quick response.
You can clearly see it. Yeah. You can clearly see it. One side's assuming one position, the other side's assuming another position. I read
a funny quote the other day. This federal election is coming down to a choice between two parties, the China party or the India party.
Yeah, or and you could almost split that in any direction. We've got to come back to our roots, and our roots are Australia. Okay, yes, it was formed, by colonial adventures and all that, but we have an identity that we need to now put forward and hold on to that identity. Yes, we get those multiple ethnicities coming in, but it needs to facilitate our development as a nation and move forward as one.
Yep.
And that's where we're digressing. And like you were saying, the China party, the India, whether it's, the Middle Eastern party, the Jewish party, it does it. Can you see the division?
Oh, absolutely.
It
so
shouldn't
why
be there.
are the major parties doing this, Tony?
Well, it gives a headline, number one. Okay, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's political manipulation of the public because it gets people starting to take sides. It diverts them away from the real issues. And what are the real issues in this country? Well, there are some real issues. Don't get me wrong. I think peace is the first one. Okay, we need to be a peaceful nation, which we are.
You mean peaceful with each other?
Yes. And these drive those what we call social cleavages. And so those social cleavages then start manifesting themselves in, and this is exactly what we're seeing. Now, I wrote a thesis on ethnic violence some years ago, but when we start seeing this political manipulation emerge in society, we start getting teams form, us, them and us. Whatever happened to Australia? Yeah. Let's just be one.
Did you write a thesis on ethnic violence?
Yes.
Is this for your law degree?
No, it's a criminology degree. I've got an honours degree in criminology. Yeah.
Let's talk about your background because you have a fascinating background. You started out as a tradesman.
Yes.
You were told at school that
university
was not your thing. Started out as a trader. You did 2 trades and then got into criminology and then law. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so out of school, 2 trades, mechanic and then straight out of I just didn't like it. Got into telecommunications, didn't like that, and I said I need to do something better. I was very big on social justice. Very big on social justice. Social justice has transformed now too, so it's not what it used to be, which was that old lefty type culture of let's stick out, for the hard battler. It's gone. It's totally gone. It's not that way. Yep. And as I said, I used to be with the Labor lawyers, so I've transitioned immensely from that period, and I got into law. And I remember my first criminology essay, and they said very politely, they said, "I don't think university's for you," because and I read that essay, and I was thinking to myself, I'm amazed I didn't get charged for malicious damage. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. But then I came back and I did something. I went and got a tutor. And that lady, she's passed away now, but she helped me with my essays and all that. And I ended up walking out with an honours degree. So
in criminology?
Yeah, social science, criminology.
What drew you to that? You seem to be drawn towards helping people who are down and out.
Yeah, again, it comes back from that philosophical upbringing with my mum. So, some you can't help, and but some you can rehabilitate. And to me, it meant a lot that social justice to me meant, let's give them the opportunity to rehabilitate, because under the Perry School program, which is a school of criminology, or a program, the Perry School program said this, and this now leads us into a sort of a conservative type flavour, which is for every dollar I spend, to rehabilitate offenders, we save $5 down the back, because we're not now investing in jails. We're not. So the longer we keep someone in jail, the more institutions we build, the more cost the taxpayer then has to bear this. Can you see the flow-on effect? Yeah. But if we invest $1 on the preventative side of things, so the environmental criminology aspect of it, and so that's why I'm also big on law and justice, and I worked in the enforcement area in that area for some time, just around the corner here, many police stations around New South Wales actually. So for me, it was a case of, if we use our tax dollars wisely, again, here we come back to the Australia policy, which is, let's build Australia for what it is, We need to be tolerant, but we also need, where the circumstance arise, to be tough. We need to be able to have a strong defence, which again is a big concern for me. And I published a book chapter in 2014, the International Handbook of Whistleblower Research. And the purpose of that was taxpayer fraud, waste and wrongdoing. And I could see that politicians are just signing cheques, And they're signing these cheques. It's not their money, So the government is saying, I'm approving Project A, I'm approving Project B. But where's your research? Where's all this coming from? And what value is that bringing to a society, especially in circumstances where what you're paying for may not be what we get, and what happens when we don't get what we get? And I wanted to introduce a False Claims Act.
So this is this is you and you're wearing your criminologist hat. How did that cross over with politics?
I could see
not to say that all politicians are criminals.
No, yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't be too far off the mark sometimes I'd say, the way they go. Because to me, signing a cheque, let me give you an example. In the book, I talk about the F-35 strike fighter, which is the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. Brilliant plane by all standards and this and that. But it was plagued. They're still falling out of the sky today. For some time, it couldn't fly in conditions where there was lightning. Now, this is one of the most advanced jet fighter things out there, planes out there. It's a wonderful platform, don't get me wrong, and by all reviews. But what we were doing, we were paying for a Ferrari but getting a Monaro. Okay, does that make...
Yeah.
It's a nice sports muscle.
But who commissioned you to sort of investigate whether politicians were acting with integrity?
Well, no, that's me.
Oh, you just did it off your own back?
Yeah, because...
This is 2014.
I started writing it with the ANU, one very clever professor, Tom Faunce, the late Tom Faunce, I should say now. He's a very wonderful man. But we were looking at medicine and false claims and law, okay? So he was at the Faculty of Medicine and Law at the ANU, Australian National University. And we were looking at how can we bring a law into Australia. And we were really talking, the Australian Federal Police were really big on this, and it just dropped off the radar. I think something's turned somewhere, but the integral feature is this, Abraham Lincoln passed the law, okay, called the False Claims Act back in the United States, okay, and the purpose of that was to stop the Treasury of the US being defrauded or false claims. A classical example of that would be this. We buy bulletproof vests for our military, okay? These are our sons and daughters. We're going to throw them in the front line. I want them to have the best stuff they can have, okay? We see then that the ratings of these bulletproof vests don't stop the common, say, AK-47 round or AK-74 round, which is what they typically use these days. But we're buying, let's say 100,000 units at $20,000 a pop. If it's not stopping that bullet, then what are we doing? And who's signing that check? That's just an example. That didn't happen.
Well, that's a very good example, and it's emblematic of government in general. Milton Friedman had a famous anecdote about the circumstances in which you are least likely to care about how you spend money, and that is, if you're spending someone else's money on something for someone else, not for yourself, then you don't care about the value and you don't care about the quality. And he immediately added to that, that's what governments do.
Yes.
And they don't care. I mean, it's endemic in the sort of political mindset that wastage is just a part of the job description, really, isn't it? I mean, I'll give you another example, actually. Down at Bondi, there's been a proliferation of bollards, concrete bollards, for reasons that we've already addressed in this conversation. And they're everywhere, all around the beach and all around the boardwalk. But there's an ice cream truck that needs to come and go from the boardwalk, and so they've left a gap for the ice cream truck. Now, I don't know how much money they've spent on those bollards. It would be in the tens, if not more, thousands of dollars. And anyone who wanted to cause havoc down there could see this gap where the ice cream truck comes and goes every day and goes, oh, well, the bollards may as well not exist. And that is a perfect example of government waste. Yeah. So you were drawn to that. Now you're running for running for a seat for the second time.
Absolutely. So
what made you run for a minor party rather than the Liberal Party?
Well, the major parties have deviated, okay? So Labor's not the Labor we used to have, and Liberals not the... They are essentially two faces on the same coin, okay? They're not giving you options, okay? So you've had a budget. They're saying we'll give you a $5 tax cut.
A cup of coffee
Liberals
a week.
Liberals aren't doing any better than that. And remember, we wasted billions on COVID, okay? Billions. And What do we know? And I've been fighting this from day one, and I'm going to continue with every fibre in my body, because that was the biggest scam, and I still think it was the biggest scam we ever had. And I'm sorry, whether it's politically correct or not, I have fought this, and I'm going to continue to fight it. If we're going to talk about a false claim and defrauding the Australian taxpayer, that is going to be one of the biggest cases it has to run in this country.
I couldn't agree more, Tony, and I admire the work you've already done in this field. Can you just tell us how many people you defended and what sort of victories you've had so far of people who were falsely charged or somehow victimised as a result of the lockdowns and vaccines?
Yeah, well, there's been many from day one, and I'd even appear from New South Wales in Darwin courts by Zoom, pro bono, some of it. Down in Canberra, I'd be appearing in the magistrates' courts in all over this nation, especially during lockdown. We did have many victories, especially the mask-type victories or the oppressive ones where someone was out. I think we've won all those cases. And there's a really big one we're in negotiations with the police now, and that was where 12-year-olds were pepper sprayed for not wearing a mask in circumstances where the orders at the time did not compel people to have a mask. But
12-year-olds were pepper sprayed.
Yes. So
this happened in Sydney?
Yeah, in Seven Hills. And this is ridiculous, because what ended up happening there was the US media caught it, the Australian media blocked it out. Okay, what they actually said was the Australian media said anti-vaxxers, her and her mum, but in the background there were these 12-year-olds, and the police just went wild. They were just pepper spray, and shopkeepers were coming out like from the sushi shop and places, grabbing kids and pouring water and milk in their eyes, because these kids, and Dan Bongino, are you familiar with Dan Bongino?
Yeah.
Oh, a lovely guy. And he came out, he was scathing. He said, any politician that authorised this sort of power should not be in power whatsoever. And he said, I'm a big fan of the blue. He used to be Secret Service police. I'm a big fan too. I'm a massive fan. I actually employed some of those ones who left because of the mandates, and I've got good mates in there. Love the blue. I think they've got a really hard job. Yes, they do cross the line themselves sometimes, but that's why we have a legal system. We have the rule of law. We need to go after them. We do go after them if they do that, but generally en masse, they are lovely people. They're like me and you. Dan Bongino came out and said, you wear a uniform, but you need to wear it with pride. And what you did there is disgusting. You should take that uniform off, and you should not be able to have a gun by your side, because what they did there, they did not. And when you it's gruesome footage with these kids and mothers crying, and why are you pepper spraying? You hear this. And I think Dan's analysis of that, and bless him for saying it, because someone had to say it. They weren't getting called out. I'm calling them out. And I've been calling them out. I'm going to continue to call them out. And the reason being, the jabs did not confer immunity. They did not stop transmission. They haven't stopped the hospitalisations, and they haven't stopped the deaths. I could not make it any simpler.
In fact, they caused deaths.
Yes. And we've got all these people now saying, I've got myocarditis, I've got We were saying that in the case of Kassam. We were saying the trajectory of ill health is actually multiplying. And the New South Wales Health was pushing out statistics showing that the more jabs, the more likely you would have been ICU, which was the opposite of what the media was telling us. And if you remember the politicians, they were coming out saying it's safe and effective. But we had the documents, and it wasn't showing safe or effective.
What should happen, Tony?
We need prosecutions. That's what we need.
Of politicians or bureaucrats? Or
politicians, bureaucrats, and those who could have done something but didn't do anything, they may need to be civilly or liable in their capacity. But we were misled, and we were misled to the extent, and I'm very passionate about this, because I've got clients who are in wheelchairs. We've got young kids who are shaking, right? They were completely healthy. I did a post on Twitter not long ago where young children were being injected with expired COVID jabs, and under the age of 10, we've had like 7 or 9 deaths. Why isn't this in the media? Remember, every day someone died. If one person died, it was all over the place.
Of COVID?
Of COVID. Well, with
supposedly
COVID.
Of
with
COVID.
COVID.
With COVID, yes.
And I say that because during 222 campaigning, Scott Morrison came out in the media and he said, I just want to reiterate, and this didn't go anywhere because it was one of those shifty media, and the media needs to be prosecuted, okay? Someone needs to be prosecuted in the media because what has happened here has been ridiculous. Scott Morrison came out during the campaign and they may say, oh, it's a nuanced answer and maybe it's out of context, but he actually said this and it's there and it's in my Instagram and Twitter. You will see it. He said no one's died from COVID in Australia. Yes, they have died with it, but no one's died from COVID. Now, this was an integral part that was missed. February 21 February 2021, Greg Hunt came out and said, we are now engaged in the world's biggest clinical trial.
I remember that. Yeah.
Now.
And soon afterwards, he banned ivermectin.
Yes. And what was the key to that? Well, under the Biosecurity Act, 2015, we had these measures, the pandemic potential, okay, pandemic potential. Section 475, subsection C, okay, actually indicated, well, that was C of the other enumerated passages, but in that, it actually held that if there are no other alternative treatments to COVID, okay, we need to take certain measures and
it's emergency approval. Emergency approval can be granted.
Provisional, provisional approval.
Provisional, yeah.
Yes. And you're absolutely correct. And with that came these mandates and banning of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. Well, I got sick with COVID in 2021. Sweet. I was fine. New South Wales Health were ringing me every day saying, because I had to lock down and all. I was fine. I was bad flu. It wasn't the best, but I've had worse flus. I will be very honest. I've had worse flus than this. It wasn't good. It was uncomfortable, but I was taking ivermectin and I was taking these protocols. I was up and about in 2-3 days. I was bouncing back. And they would ring me and they'd say, what are you doing? I said, well, I came to hospital. You guys gave me 2 Panadols and told me to leave in the middle of a pandemic that you are saying is so deadly. You gave me 2 Panadols, told me to go home. I'm taking ivermectin and I'm taking all these other, vitamins and that you said don't do. And they said, where are you getting your ivermectin? I said, none of your business. It's none of your business, but I'm getting better. Okay? And here's the story.
Where did you get your ivermectin?
Where?
Yeah.
Oh, I had storage.
Yeah. Well, I met someone in the middle of it who gave me the number of some Indian supplier. I never actually followed that up, but I slipped in and got some ivermectin just before the Greg Hunt put the hammer down.
Yeah.
But even then, it was the doctor was in on the scam himself because he only prescribed me a few milligrams, and which wasn't enough to get me through a case anyway. But the clear resistance against ivermectin wasn't just from politicians, it was from the media as well. Now, it seems clear to me that the larger media networks in America rely very heavily on advertising from Big Pharma. And I think they were under instructions to back the vaccines, because Big Pharma was going to make a lot of money out of it, and propagate propaganda about ivermectin as part of the deal in order to save their own commercial asses. What do you think?
Yes, there's 2 parts to that, and one is you're absolutely here in Australia too. They are heavily remember they use these foundations, okay? So there's I won't put names out there, but there are just call them foundations. There are foundations that are created for the specific purpose of funding models. Those funding models then go through a number of channels and trusts and other foundations, and then they get to a source. That source is the media, okay? Where did it come from? If you actually trace it back, it'll come back to the pharmaceutical company, right?
Yeah. And
that's happening in Australia, okay? It is happening in Australia. That's why it took so long for them to actually acknowledge that there was some sort of a disaster. The lobby groups in Parliament, they are absolutely infected by big groups that have a lot of money that get them going places, okay? We need to stop this because that is the bigger threat to democracy than, say, a China, or just as bad as a Chinese warship off your coast, okay? Again, that's why I'm a big advocate of a strong military. That's another subject. But that is just as dangerous to a participatory democracy than you can have, because there's no participation of the representative.
Exactly. Yeah, who are they representing?
They're representing someone else, and it's the minority, and it's not the people.
They're all commercial interests.
Absolutely.
So let's just get back to the forthcoming election. It's clear that I don't think Australia could survive another 3 years of Labor because they're just incompetent and they have all the wrong priorities. The alternative is a coalition government, which is slightly better, but you're representing one of the fringe parties. Where do you stand? Do you think, are you hoping to win your seat of Werriwa for a start, but also that the coalition does form government?
Well, Werriwa it's traditionally, Gough Whitlam. That's Gough
Yeah,
Whitlam's.
and Mark Latham.
Yeah, Mark Latham too. Yeah, Werriwa.
It's a famous Labor seat.
Labor
you don't
seat.
stand much chance. I hate to break it to you.
Yeah,
Tony.
no, I'm punching above me weight, but
Yeah,
I've been
yeah.
punching above me weight, and see, that's the grit that Australia has taught me, and that my father taught me too. The great migrant story is you're going to face so many challenges. You may not win every battle, but you just got to get up every day, show up, get to work, and just do your bit. Get to that coalface and just work. Some days aren't going to succeed, and we've gone on this. We're in this society that if you didn't win, you didn't. No, it's not about winning. It's about getting up and putting yourself on the line, calling it out where you see it. And you don't need to win, because I may not win today. Like when I ran the Kassam case, I didn't win the case; it was dismissed. But look at the scientists that called us fringe. Jay Bhattacharya is now the director of the NIH. I brought him here for 2 cases when no one knew it, right? And they were calling us fringe. Let me tell you, we got Peter McCullough, we had Dr. Brian Tyson, we had Dr. Sabine Hazan, we had Dr. Professor Bridehope, sorry, and there were many others, okay? These are all top of their field. We're all called fringe. Fringe politics again, same with the people first. Gerard Rennick has been punching above his weight in the Senate, and that's what appealed to me. And when I was...
It's interesting you say that, because I don't think you're fringe. I think you represent mainstream Australia. I mean, you're obviously running third in Werriwa. What did you get last time? You ran for United Australia Party.
Yeah, I ran with Clive Palmer's United Australia Party. I got about 9.89, 9.8. But
Okay.
It went above. It went above 11 at 1%, but I think it filtered down a little bit, just under
All
10.
right.
Yeah. but
So that's a pretty decent outcome when you're in a traditionally safe Labor seat and you're up against a Liberal as well. But I can't speak for the incumbent Labor member or whoever from the Liberal Party is going up against her. But
Sam Cale.
Sam Cale.
Yeah, he's the Liberal. He's a lovely guy, lovely family, and I met him at the last one. He's a really nice guy. Personal vote. I think on a personal level, put it this way: if I was with the Liberal Party, I had their vote, I'd most probably win.
Yeah,
because it'd be the party vote. It'd be the party vote plus my personal vote.
Yeah.
People would say he's got values.
You're not going to compromise your values to climb the slippery scales of the Liberal Party.
No.
It's too corrupt, isn't it?
I'm going to say what appeals with Gerard Rennick is what you see is what you get. He's got good policies. He's looking at how do we move this country forward. So he's talking people first. Mm-hmm. What have I been doing? People first.
Yeah.
People first.
So give us in a nutshell, what is the People First Manifesto?
Well, the People First Manifesto is about taking our party outside. It's outside the mainstream, number one. It's about effective tax policies. It's about addressing those shortfalls that we have in this society. Let me give you an example. Kids. My kids, they're in their 20s. Your kids, I'm assuming, in and around the same age. They can't buy a house in Australia. Go back a couple of decades. We could buy houses and you could live. Dad could go to work. Mum controlled the house. I'm not saying that has to always be the case. And no, I'm not anti-feminist because I'm saying this.
Yeah.
You had a choice. You wanted to go to work. My mum used to work as a cook in a kitchen. They did this. But you could buy a house. One wage could sustain the home. It could...
And pay off a mortgage.
Mum was at home whooping the kids because do your homework, eat your dinner, healthy. healthy upbringing.
Mow the lawn.
Yes, giving them a chore, setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay, this is that value we've lost in society. So now when they talk about we're losing value, well, let's take it back to the root cause, okay, as to how we got there. So people first is a part of bringing that back. What are some of the things? Well, average rent, if you can get a rental because of the mass immigration that's coming through. Home ownership, well, $627 or something, it says. What is it? CPI up 2.4%. Like our tax dollars just being filtered into reckless programs. Why not bring them back?
You know, the budget included $5 billion in foreign aid.
Yes.
It's crazy.
This is
at a time when Donald Trump is exposing the corruption of these of the foreign aid industry. I don't say there's anything wrong with helping countries that need a hand, but most of this money just goes into non-government organisations run by the friends of politicians anyway. It doesn't actually help anyone. So, I mean, there's a start. $5 billion could be saved overnight.
Absolutely.
And that's what they're doing in the US.
Absolutely.
I mean, do you think there's an appetite in Australia for the sort of ruthlessly pragmatic approach that Elon Musk and Donald Trump, our friend here, Donald Trump, is taking in the US?
Oh, big balls with big balls. You heard of that one? That's that makes me laugh, and I love it. But it takes that.
But is there an appetite for that in Australia?
There has to be. We may not, and that's the thing.
But a lot of Australians have got their hands out these days. You know, there's a lot of Australians,
Why have
for
they got
example,
their hands out?
on the NDIS. There's a lot of Australians on the dole. You know, there is a kind of a laziness has crept into our culture and a sense of entitlement. How do you get that back, Tony?
Well, that was a part of the conditioning of getting us towards a society that's reliant on a supreme leader. Okay, we're not a country. Look, a participatory democracy is not about having a leader; it's about having representatives.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
We need representatives that represent the people. Yes, at some point there'll be someone leading a party. Yes, I'm all for that, but we're suckling off the teat of government that says you cannot sustain yourself if it isn't for me. Well, that's a Kim Jong-un sort of thing where we need to pay homage to a supreme... No, and that's where we're leading, because if you have a look at the funding, especially during COVID, they were pouring out tens and hundreds of millions for programs. That has left us in such a black hole, and it wasn't necessary. Again, taxpayer dollars, the Milton Friedman thing you spoke about earlier, that is exactly where we've become. Now, we shouldn't be this entitled society. Get up off your butts. Let's get to work. Let's get this country moving forward. Let's have a look at what can we do, because we're being taxed on the money we earn. We're being taxed on the money we buy. We're being taxed on everything that we do. That is ridiculous, because that's why we cannot get move forward. It then goes into a program that starts supporting people to sit home and do. Don't get me wrong, there are people who need our disability, and that I'm all for. I'm all for a strong healthcare system, a really well-funded one, but an efficiently funded one.
Yeah.
Not one that we're just throwing tens of $1 billion. Oh, let's do these DEI sort of. That's got nothing to do with that. Okay.
So the next election, what's the best outcome?
Best outcome is, let's say we get a couple of senators and some minor representatives coming through who can start balancing out the seats. I actually see it's the beginning of the end for the two majors. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's the beginning of the end of the two majors. They're going to start walking a fine
Well,
line.
Labor's sitting on 33%. It's the low. I think that's the lowest primary vote of any federal government in our history, isn't it?
Well, it is, but you're also looking at statistics that are generally owned or governed, and have a look at any election. They create that perception of a tussle, like 51 to 49, and it's all happening, and this is going to be a tight one. That's all BS. Okay, let me tell you what's actually happening. If you actually get to the street, and this is when you actually get to the street, people are saying, you know what, I'm fed up. I'm struggling. Okay, because it's either Australian kids are getting really strong because they can carry $200 worth of shopping in one hand, because that's literally where we're at. They must be really strong, or our cost of living is in a crisis. And that's where no one's... And now people are starting to feel it. And now people are saying, what are our governments doing? $5 billion overseas, I think, is absolutely reckless. It is so reckless. We need to bring that back. We need to focus on these people. We've got kids. We've got families. We need to raise them.
So you have clients who are down and out, have been victimised by the system or are in other ways disadvantaged and need your help legally. What sort of mentality do you find among those people? I mean, are they determined to make... I mean, middle-class people are being screwed and, they're all working 2 or 3 jobs or whatever. But at the lower end of society, what's the mood like? Is there a desperation to get ahead?
Yes. I'm out in Western Sydney, so I spend a lot of time in the Western. It's a conservative heartland. Love it. Like, you go out there, and it doesn't matter. Again, religion doesn't matter out there, but they're very conservative. They're like, we have these family values, and they've got family values. If you go out Western Sydney way, you've got the Christians, you've got the Muslims, you've got the Sikhs, you've got, you name it, they're all the Jewish people. They're all out there, but they're very family orientated, and that's a people first type philosophy. Is like, how do we get this together and bring this country and move it forward? And we can only do that with a nice systematic approach as to where each family gets together and says, right, how do we do this? Well, we've got to do it in a way that's systematic, and that systematic starts with tax reforms.
Yeah.
Okay? We need tax reform. I'm a businessman. I pay so much tax. It is so hard. And then, we pay a wage tax, we pay an income tax, and then we've got the levies, and then we've got rates. This is why the average punter out there is getting sick and tired of Liberal and Labor. And what do they say? Oh, I understand you're doing it tough. I'm going to give you a cup of coffee worth of a tax cut, okay? And remember the last one? They said we're going to give you a $275 electricity rebate. Well, did that happen? No, it actually went up. It actually went up. So we've got poor infrastructure. We need to bring manufacturing back to Australia. We need to pump this country up. And that's what I'm for, because when we were, in the sugarcane fields, when we were building Snowy River and those sorts of programs and doing those big... this is what Australia was. It was a muscle country. We were building cars. We had stuff. We can get stuff off the Tasman Sea and start drilling and refining our own oil. Climate change. Oh, really? Yes, don't get me wrong. Serious issue, but not that serious when your country's going to send itself broke chasing a net zero. It was like zero COVID. Ridiculous policies. They are just so unattainable. We got to get our heads out of the sky and say, what is realistic? And it's not realistically attainable what they're selling us.
So what's your advice to the punters? Like, you've got a smattering of candidates for the House of Reps in various seats around the country, and some candidates for the Senate as well. How do people who are sick of the 2 major parties get behind People First? Well,
one thing is go to the People First website. There's a few candidates. You've got Senator Rennick up there. Again, look at the conduct, not what they're talking. Because if we look at what we're talking, you just got to look at... Can I just show that?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Campaign of fear. I think that's an understatement.
Okay.
I'm scared just looking at those 2 blokes.
Well, yeah, and what do they do every day? They come out and they say, we've got your back. Well, no, I don't want you to have my back, okay? I want you to stick with the country and start giving us something that we can rely on. And Gerard Rennick, he's a lovely guy. He's a lovely family guy, okay? And the candidates that he's running, they're not fringe. They're very intelligent people. And
well, like you, they have real-world experience.
Yes.
These guys don't.
No, they don't. And thank you, because that is a really good point. And one of the issues, these guys didn't run businesses, but they're multimillionaires.
Yeah.
How do you get that on that salary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got to correct myself. I mean, Peter Dutton does have some real-world experience.
He was a copper.
And he ran a small business, so, I correct myself there. But, I mean, he's been in Parliament for over 20 years.
Most of them haven't done...
It's too long.
Yeah, most of them haven't been on the ground and put... There are some there, and absolutely, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
But a career politician isn't feeling what we're feeling, and that's why they're so out of tune. They don't know, they haven't lived. What is it like paying your person? What is it like when they take a sick leave and, they need to go out on these.
Well, what's it like
What's
to
the
represent
employer
someone
doing?
who's an Indigenous brother who's been wrongfully arrested?
And he's got a family at home who was relying on his wage. Now they're lighting fires literally in the lounge room in the middle of winter because there's no way of lighting a fire. It's too cold to go outside. Wow. Okay, and these are true stories, and this is what's happening. They don't know this. Well, they know it, but they're not doing nothing about it. And this is what I try and go around and do. During COVID, where they had that guy on a ventilator, a dentist, we ran an emergency injunction one day, and we changed his medications. We brought our doctors in. It's a precedent injunction, urgent intervention. They said he's got 4 to 48 hours to live, okay? And I said to him, urgent injunction. I said, well, let's get our doctors. Well, the daughter, God love her, the daughter, Anastasia. She said, my dad's been given this. We need to do something. We need to change something here. And so we put on an urgent injunction. I remember Justice Rothman at the time, this better be good, Mr. Nikolic, something along those, because it was a public holiday. And I've got him out of a public holiday. He's at home. You could see, we're doing this urgent injunction. And we've got our client, well...
To get him off the ventilator?
He's on a ventilator.
So the injunction is to get him off it?
Yeah, well, it was an ICU. He was in ICU.
Right.
And I said, well, Your Honour, the barristers and myself were, Your Honour, and the doctors, and Jay Bhattacharya gave evidence in that. He needs a Nobel Peace Prize. So does everyone on the Kassam case. Everyone needs a Nobel Peace Prize on that case because of what they did. But with this one gentleman, we got the doctors involved and professors, and we put on evidence. And with that 4 to 48 hours that they said, he was going to... I said, well, he's going to die anyway. That's what you're saying on your evidence. And that was the interventionists, the intensive care people. That's your protocol. You've been saying and selling to everybody, this is how you're making I said, let us get our team in there, okay? You know what happened? Within a few days, he was off the ventilator. He is at home. He is a dentist. He is at home. He works out 6 days a week. So from being given 4 to 48 hours to live, and they invite me over for lunches and dinners, and we sit at the table before we eat, we pray and all that sort of... Lovely family. If it wasn't for that daughter sticking up for her son, that man would have been deceased if he followed the protocol which he was on. He was on it for 3 months, and he just kept going down and down and down and down. We got in there. We did that. The purpose of what I'm saying is we're all sold a big myth, okay, not just there but also politically, and we need the courage, and that's what we don't have. We don't have anyone. We don't have anyone from either side who stood up, and everyone who stood up was shot down. And like
Gerard Rennick.
Gerard Rennick. And so he was made a martyr, and that's... I was hammered too, don't get me wrong, I got hammered, but I stayed by and I still do. My job is to stick up for people. That is my job. And if I was to go to Parliament, that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Well, I was just going to say, that's the definition of a politician, isn't it?
That's what I'm going to continue to do. Yeah. And I want to do it without fear or favour. If I see it red, it's going to be called red.
So how long before we see you in Parliament?
That's up to the voters. It's not up to me, but I think they know, Fred, that, what you see is what you get. I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect, and I don't cover every subject out there, but one thing you can be certain of is that I will take those people's plight and I will put it to something, and I'll do my best to get something and definitely give them an outcome. Whether it's Western Sydney or the Senate for New South Wales, that's something that's the voice we need, because we're not any longer in a participatory democracy. Sorry.
That's a very good point. So if you don't, God forbid, if you don't make it in Werriwa this time, would you run again at the next election? Yeah,
Mark, you look at what I do every day. I get up, I take the hit, I get down, bang, I'll get up again. I used to coach and manage soccer teams when I was young, and I used to say to the kids, well, it's not about winning and losing. It's about getting up and getting back on the field and developing yourself to such an extent that we improve ourselves as we go along. And the story came, and I had a really good coach who was coaching me to teach kids, the younger kid, through that middle age bracket. And I'd have parents going, oh, this kid can't kick a ball, and why are you putting him on the field? And why? And I said, yeah, he can't kick a ball today. But I said, if 2 or 3 of our good players go down, he's not going to be able to kick a ball at the grand final. And so if we make it to the grand final, I need him to be developed. And that's what a nation is, okay? And that's how we build nations. That's how we build resilience. And that's how we build everything that we've got to do. We're not...
But, Tony, I've got to interrupt. I mean, it is about winning because you've been giving the viewers glimpses of your tat every time you play. So it is about winning. Back-to-back, 18 and 19 for the Roosters.
Yeah, the Roosters,
yeah.
Love them.
Yeah. How did you wind up a Roosters fan?
Mate, grew up, and I think it was in the 70s, I guess I must have heard it subliminally, because they were doing really good Artie Beetson and all those guys at that time. Russell Fairfax, a great team at the time. And I don't know how, but I'm still a member. I'm a member. I try and get to as many games as I can. I love the Roosters. If they lose on a Sunday, Monday's a bad day. If they lose on a Friday, it gives me till Monday to get over it. Again, they're going through a bit of a rough patch at the moment. They're going through a rebuilding phase. But the same philosophy there. You get, they're crap and they're shit. And, they're saying, they're developing. Yeah. That to me is developing. And they're going to get better. And they're going to build. And that's what we need to do here. And that's exactly what we're going to do moving forward.
Spoken like a true Australian, Tony. Good on you, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.